Hey everybody, it's Matt here with the Choir Director Corner and doing a little video tutorial here on how I like to use the Choir Director Corner planner. If you haven't checked out the planner yet, if you go to choirdirectorcorner.com, there will be a link there at the top of the page where you can sign up to receive our free planner. It comes to you in the email in a PDF version. You can also go to our resources page, and there's also a link there where you can click on that. And it's great to hear that so many of you are enjoying this, that you're finding it helpful. I have had a couple of questions from folks as far as, well, it's a template for a planner. How do you use it? And so I was just doing a quick little tutorial here just to kind of show you how I like to use it. You certainly don't have to use it this way, but maybe this gives you some ideas as you're using the planner to help organize your rehearsals. So I'm not going to go through the calendar or sort of the personal planner part of it. I'm looking specifically at the big picture rehearsal map, as I like to call it, and then also the by the week rehearsal planner. And so with my schedule at my school, how things usually work out is I've got 8 weeks per rehearsal period. And so I've taken this big picture rehearsal map, and there's 4 weeks to a page. And so you can see at the top of the page, I put in my ensemble name, that's my chorale, that's my 10th through 12th grade mixed choir, and then the rehearsal period. And so this is actually an example from last spring. The rehearsal plan that I put together for this ensemble. So the first 4 weeks especially, I kind of like to map out for myself just visually what sections of the piece, each piece I'm covering that week. And that way I make sure that I cover everything, and then I get into some different things with assessment and things like that. So just want to share this with you here quickly. And so I'm going to zoom in here a little bit to show you week by week what I've got. So with the week one, obviously you're introducing your music. We use solfege with everything in our choirs, and so that's something that we begin. And so I had the choir working on four pieces: Regina Celli by Palestrina, Desh, With a Lily by Whitaker, and then also a new piece called The Listeners by composer Jimmy Dagnan. And so I'm mapping out sort of the sections that week that I want to make sure that I start with. I'm starting with sections that I feel like are pretty singable. Um, in some cases, I'm starting with a section that maybe I know they're going to need a head start on, like with a lily, that measure 30 through 38. That's sort of the water section with the triplets, if you're familiar with that piece. And so I knew that was something I wanted to get started on right away. But the beginning section of that, pretty singable, and is sort of themes that come up in the rest of the piece. So I thought that would be a good section to start with. So that's really what I'm doing then in week one. And so with week two, I'm usually trying to finish up with solfege that week with the singers, as far as covering all parts of the pieces with solfege. That's kind of what I mean by finishing solfege. With solfege, you're never really finished. You kind of know how that works. And so then the different sections, again, that I'm looking at covering with those pieces. Sort of the same thing with week three, finishing with solfege, and then after solfege, I like to move to a neutral syllable to have them sing, and so they're able to still focus on mainly pitch, but getting away from using those syllables and see if they can execute the pitch, the tonality, the harmonies of the pieces independently from that solfege. And so you're seeing some different sections of each piece. You'll see some of the things that I'm going back to review, usually some of the tougher sections going back to review, and starting to introduce some new concepts. For instance, in the Desh, that's got some overtone singing, and so that was the week that I wanted to start in talking about that with my singers. That was something new for them. Um, Also, I do small group assessments, and I try and do 3, maybe 4 per quarter or per rehearsal period. And so I'm kind of mapping out in my mind which piece, which section I want to do. And as I'm doing that, that may change as I get closer to that week. But that just kind of gives me an idea of maybe what I'm going to use, and then as I'm looking at my rehearsals leading up to that, I can then change that, or that reminds me to say, oh, that's something that I need to make sure that I'm covering so that they're ready for that. Week 4, then, definitely moving to your neutral syllable of choice here. I like to do count singing with my singers, and so that's something that I use quite a bit, and so that's sort of the next step of my process. And then hopefully then by week 4, then starting to get into text. And so you can kind of see, I usually take my time getting into text. I like to get, everything sort of set as far as pitches and rhythms before I start to introduce that. Unless it's something that I know that they're very comfortable with, that's something that I hold off on. So then another small group assessment, and then some more excerpts from each piece. So as I move down to week 5, then sort of halfway through, I guess you could say, the rehearsal period leading up to a concert, it becomes less about which specific section. They hopefully by now have covered every single section in each piece that they're working on, and so now it becomes more about specific concepts and specific goals that I have for each piece. Now, obviously, we're covering different concepts in those excerpts in the first 4 weeks, but now I can really start to focus in on some of those things. So, obviously, by this week, text, and this is sort of the week where I'm really looking at having them singing through each piece on text from beginning to end. And that gives me the opportunity to then assess how they're doing. Excuse me, finding a cold here. And then also gives them an opportunity to sort of self-evaluate and kind of see where they're at as well. And so, as you can see, I've got a small group assessment this week. And so different things that I will try. I wanted to do some having them singing in circles by their section, so changing up the arrangement of the room. Also then moving to mixed formation, depending on the piece. We like to do a lot of our singing in mixed formation if it sort of fits the style of the music you're working on. This is the week where, if I haven't done it already, which I usually have, but this becomes sort of more of a focus, is that I record and then have them listen to rehearsal excerpts. Again, giving them the opportunity to analyze and to self-evaluate how they're doing. And then with the listeners, since this is a brand new piece that we worked on, it was a commission with the composer, Jimmy Dignan, meeting with him, getting some feedback with him. I gave the students some opportunity to ask some questions from him about the piece. And then also, that was an accompanied piece, a fairly difficult accompaniment. And so we have an accompanist that will come in and work with our choirs. And so that was something that became more of a focus then in that week. Week 6 then, we are getting, if we haven't already, then to memorization. We memorize all of our music for our concerts, and so that's a part of our process. And then with each piece here, I'm really sort of narrowing my focus, narrowing my goals, my objectives with each piece. What do I really want to focus on with each piece? And so with Regina, it was the phrasing and the style. With listeners, really working on making the vowels uniform and really bringing out the text of that poetry. That was something that I really wanted to emphasize. And so then also other things with the other pieces as well. Week 7, you're getting into getting close to the end here, the nitty gritty, and so finishing up, completing the memorization. Again, I will record a rehearsal and have them self-evaluate. Working more closely with any instrumentalists if you have that as a part of any of the music, and really just focusing on polishing. And that's sort of that last week. I want to use that week to look at any of the very fine details that maybe have been missed or have been glossed over by the singers, and really bring those to the forefront so that we can create a performance that is not only accurate but also very musical. And we'll have a practice concert. And so, again, that's just a straight run through of our music, all memorized. And often I will again have the students self evaluate. How are they doing in that process? What are some of the things that they need to tackle in that last week leading up to the concert? And then finally, my last week, then that's my concert. I have them do a concert reflection and also a self evaluation. And then we will often have some singing assessments at the end of the quarter, both individual and group assessments. And so that's something that we've got going on that week as well. So that is sort of the big picture, as I like to call it, rehearsal plan that I like to use to just sort of map out what I'm doing each week. Okay, so that's the big picture rehearsal plan. Now I'm going to move on to our weekly rehearsal plan and show you how I like to break down each week. So this, for example, was week 3. And so this week, I have the goals for the week. So this is a section where it can be a bit of a brain dump if you want to just sort of dump all of your ideas as far as what you want to accomplish for the week. Often I will do that on a separate piece of paper and then organize those thoughts in this section. This is probably a little bit nicer than maybe what mine normally looks like, but I've rewritten it so it's a little bit more organized for you. So week 3, I would be finishing with some solfege and then hopefully getting to singing on a neutral syllable with my groups. And then for each song, I've got some specific goals here. So, for instance, with the Regina Coeli, working on the flow of the phrase and articulating the eighth notes and some of the melismas in that piece. With a Lily, working on the ending section, continuing to review the water section and really working on the rhythm of that section and keeping that together. And then I will put on here, okay, I'm doing a small group assessment this week. Here is the piece and the measures that I'm going to have them work on. And so then with the week, then it's just broken down by day. And so each day I am putting what piece am I going to work on, what sections am I going to work on, and then what concepts, what areas do I want to focus on with each piece. And so, obviously, this can change. You set out to do something at the beginning of the week, and depending on how your rehearsals go, you might have to switch directions a little bit. But this at least gives me visually sort of a map as how I would hope the week to go. Hopefully, we get even further. But these are the things that I want to accomplish each day and kind of breaking them down into smaller chunks, both for me and for the singers. And so then on Tuesday, I've got some different concepts, some different sections that I'm looking at. So Regina Coeli was really focusing on the entrances and solidifying the entrances of the different sections. With Desh, I was working on there's some spoken sections in there, and so working on that as well as the end section. Um, Lily, it looks like there was a particular chords that I was working on, and also isolating some parts there as well. And so it just goes on to the Wednesday, moving to that nutrisyllable. So I'm looking at that assessment, preparing them for that assessment for the following day. That was then the day that we really dove into the overtone singing and giving the singers an explanation, sort of a demonstration, and working through that as a group. And then Thursday was their small group performances, and so I had them perform in class certain excerpts, and so I give them their pitches and I start them, but then they are on their own. I do not conduct them, and they perform for the rest of the class, and then I have them do a self-evaluation, and so they have to evaluate how they did, how their group did, what went well, and then what are some of the things that they're going to continue to work on. And then finally, last day of the week, there's the Friday. And so I like to use Fridays often as sort of a summary of the week. And so it's like, okay, here's what we've worked on. Let's pull this all together and see where we're at. And again, that gives the singers an opportunity to self-evaluate. Okay, this went really well. These are the things that I need to then take a look at. Hopefully they take a look at over the weekend. So that when they come back on Monday, we're ready to hit the ground running. And I do have some different things that maybe we haven't touched on in the week that I'm adding in on that Friday, just to keep us moving towards our goal. So that is the weekly plan broken down by day for you. And again, that is part of the planner that is on the website, choirdirectorcorner.com. And so then all of the blanks are there so that you can take this and print it and reproduce it and use it however you like. And that's just an example of how I like to use it. One other thing that I'd like to share with you, and this was not part of the planner, but this will be something that I will be making available to everyone that signed up for the planner. I will also be putting it on the website, is a template for a daily rehearsal plan. And so this is actually in Google format. So when I share this with you, it'll just have the different sections and everything will be blank. And if you like, I can even post this as a PDF on the website as sort of an example. The nice thing about this being in Google format is that if you need a little extra room for the rehearsal objectives, you can do that. If you only end up rehearsing 2 pieces instead of 3 that day, you can change all of that. So that's the wonderful thing about Google, is that you have the ability to do that. So just quickly kind of walking you through this and what this looks like. So again, I've got space for the ensemble and the date there. And so then I list my rehearsal objectives and my standards. And so very much coming from the weekly plan that you just saw, but then trying to get a little bit more specific here. And so with the 3 pieces that I was planning on doing that day, what are the sections that I'm going to be focusing on? What are the concepts that I'm going to be focusing on? Now, these standards, I've left this kind of open-ended. These are actually department standards that my department has come up with here just a couple of years ago, heavily based on the national standards, but tweaked a little bit. So you might have some standards that you're supposed to be using in your district. You might be working off of the national standards. Whatever you're using, this is a place where you can list them for reference. And so then I have a little section for warm-ups, and so I just list them there. And so then also an area for sight singing, an area for if you do any rhythm work. We use the Takadimi system, and so we have different resources that we use throughout the year, and so that's a place where you can put that, what page, what exercise you want to work on. And then how I break this down is I just kind of do number 1, number 2, number 3. And then those numbers are the pieces that I am working on. And so you can kind of divide it, your rehearsal up however you want in those different sections. Sometimes I don't get to the third one. It kind of just depends what I've got planned for that day. Sometimes I'm doing smaller chunks and I'm able to get to a fourth one if I've got four pieces that I'm working on, or adding something else in. Maybe I've got a group project that I'm having them work on, or a particular assignment that I want to give them time to work on in class. Uh, we do a listening analysis quite often, where I have them listen to a recording and then they have to discuss that. So those are different things that you can build into this lesson plan. And again, the great thing with Google is that you can use this however it fits your needs. And so I start with the first piece, which was the Regina Celli that day. And so then this is the place where I'm getting much more specific about what I want to cover, whether that's section, that's concept, and what rehearsal techniques I might be using to cover that material. And so our second piece was the listeners that day. And so then, for instance, I've got particular spots that I am looking for, that I am listening for, that I think the singers might need assistance with. And so trying to think about those things ahead of time so that I can be on the lookout for that. And then the third piece that day was with a lily, and so looking at the different things there. And then here at the bottom of the page, I've got a couple of sections for, the first section is for notes. This is a place where I like to put my announcements for the day. And so whatever announcements I need to make in class, this isn't the area where I list those. And then I also list an area for a rehearsal reflection, which I think is really important. Now, there are days where I don't get to the point where I type this out after rehearsal. Maybe I just jot some things down on paper to kind of remind myself, how did things go? Did we get to everything that I had planned? Were the techniques that I used successful? Or are there things that we need to continue to look at going forward? And so that's what I've done here, is with each piece, I've kind of done a quick summary, or just kind of put some thoughts in about how things went, and then thinking towards the next rehearsal. So with the Regina, things went pretty well, so I'm saying, okay, let's try neutral syllable on the following section. And so altos were still struggling at one of those entrances, so I know I may need to go back and hit that spot. Same thing with the other pieces. With the lily, it helped adding the text, the spoken text, to keep things together rhythmically. So having them speak that in rhythm, that was something that I had them do, and that helped them as far as keeping things together rhythmically and with the tempo change there. And so, and then obviously there's some other spots there that needed some help. So the page turn needed work, but I've also said to myself, okay, move on to such and such section. There's a key change coming up, and so you need to discuss that with the group as well. So that is what I use for my daily rehearsal plan. Again, I try and keep it as basic as possible because I know how busy directors are. You don't have hours and hours and hours to do planning, but at the same time, for me at least, it's really important for me to get these thoughts down on paper. It just really helps me keep things organized, and it helps my rehearsals run a lot more smoothly because I've already gone through that thought process of what I want to do and the sequence of those things that I'm doing. So I hope that you have found this tutorial helpful. I hope you're finding the planner, and that you will find this daily rehearsal plan template helpful. And so thank you so much for listening and for watching. And please let us know again at admin@choirdirectorcorner.com. That is the email address. If you would like to see some tweaks to these things, if you think it's great, let us know. If there are some other things as far as resources that you feel like would be valuable in your teaching, let us know that as well. And again, all of our resources you can find at choirdirectorcorner.com/resources. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon.